yesterday. I couldn't really explain what it was, but you reminded me what I love about music. And of course we know what we love about music, but sometimes you get a new reminder and a new perspective. Although I know your music very well, seeing you live was a revelation for me. So to me it feels like you've got so far into what I think is the essence of music. Stripped away all the unnecessary things. And this is something I admire, and I want to get that too. I want to get there too, or get closer to that.
Yeah,
so I'm wondering how do you go about that?
I don't think it's a conscious thing in a way. I think it's something that all musicians, like in the beginning when you look at all the materials and that music has to offer, it's daunting. I mean, there are so many different ways to create music, and and my favorite part of music is listening to it. And it's always been like that. And I sort of, I'm a big fan of music, and I have always been. So I listen to music all the time. And playing music or writing music is something that grows out of that love for music and constantly looking for something that inspires me. And this idea of trying to strip things down to something that has clarity, you know, because there's so much material to work with. And I came out of, in the beginning I played in bands in Iceland, and it was a very spontaneous culture. We didn't have a lot of tradition. And my generation was kind of the second generation of people trying to play jazz, you know. And and at the time in Iceland in the early 80s, it was difficult to learn. There wasn't really anybody. You just had to buy records and buy downbeat and listen to music from the States and Europe. So I decided to go to America to study. And at that point, I just wanted to learn. I didn't really have any specific ideas about what I wanted to do as a musician, or even if I wanted to become a musician. I just really enjoyed listening to music. And so I went through all this jazz repertoire and learning bebop and this kind of... But when it came to actually playing that music, I wanted to create something that felt closer to where I came from. And some of the collaborations in the beginning, like with Oscar Guðjónsson, helped that to find that.
For how long have you been playing with him?
We started playing maybe 20 years ago.
Wow.
And so maybe, and then this idea of the Sharia project, it was more based on the people that I was working with in different situations. I was working with Eyvind Kang, and I was working with Hildur Guðnadóttir and Jóhann Jóhannsson and all these different people. And at the time we were just trying to figure out, like, what do we want to do with music? And I thought that internal conversation and that culture of friendship was headed somewhere, and I wanted to work with that, and that was the idea of the Sharia music. Not to put a band together, but to create a community and trying out things. It was more like a workshop, in a way. Let's spend some time together and keep searching for parts and things like that. And that's still very important to me, the process. Because we're all surrounded by other musicians, and there are conversations and people are listening to different things and sharing things people like. And you see, that kind of activity I was interested in. Letting the music sort of guide the way instead of saying, okay, this is what I want to make.
But it also takes into account the influence of the people so much, So you get somebody like Olof, and she will take the music in a direction just by being who she is.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's also that also takes courage, I think, from you to let go of any thoughts, of preconceived thoughts, right?
Yeah, it's more like trusting it, or
Right.
letting things happen and not controlling things too much.
Is that maybe also a way to get more to the essence or to the core, just the of the music, of the material also? Trusting.
I think so. And I mean, we all have experiences in different situations in music making. Some situations are highly organized and some are not. And I had experiences in playing in rock bands, and I always enjoyed that kind of the culture of that. You know, people wouldn't necessarily come into a rehearsal with a fully realized piece of music.
Yeah.
But then people would just start playing without talking. And then some days later something magical would happen without any kind of control. And so that was always a model for me in any kind of situation. And I felt in the contemporary music and jazz situations, it was a bit more, sometimes more organized. You know, there was a leader with the arrangements, and I also enjoy that way of working. And sometimes that's very successful and the only way to realize a specific thing.
Yeah.
And I had experienced that with people like Ben Monder, or where he would come in with these amazing compositions, and
Fully realized.
all you had to do was just to have enough time to figure out how to play it.
Right. Yeah.
And so I enjoy like all these kind of different operations and different ways of making music.
Yeah, talking about Ben Monder, I'm very curious about how it was for you to work with him in the various configurations, learning his music, what your process was learning, because it's so complicated also what he writes at times.
Yeah.
Can you share some memories and how you went about figuring out this music?
For me it was quite difficult, you know, because of the complexity. I had to spend a lot of time just learning the parts and finding ways to make music with that density and complexity speak as music, you know. I had some experiences with complex music before, because I worked with Alan Holdsworth for many years, and there was a lot of complexity in his music, but the process was completely different, because he never wrote out his music. He would just play it for people. So everybody had a different way to get into it. Like people would have different, you know, somebody would write a chart and it would look completely different from another member in the band.
Yeah.
Because he would write all the music just rubato, and then he would quantize it in any way where the harmony would need to stay for, you know, 8 beats or 13
Gary
beats or
Husband
whatever.
told me about this.
Yeah. And I enjoyed that, even though it was difficult to figure out. But the final result was very free and open, because everybody had to find their own way into the complexity of the music and totally internalize it.
Who was the bassist before you in Alan Holdsworth's band?
It was the greatest, you know, Jimmy Johnson.
Was Jimmy?
Yeah.
So did he give you some advice? You know,
he was very supportive, and he did. But there wasn't really any kind of because Alan just wanted to hire some personalities and said, you know, just play the way you play. And he would never, ever tell anybody what to do. So he trusted people, and there was a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
So that experience was important to me, because I had listened to his music and I had no idea that it was put together that way. And then finally, when you get into it and you figure it out, then it makes a lot of sense. And then bringing that experience into the music of Ben Monder, it is even, I mean, it's more organized, and he writes these beautiful arrangements and bass lines and all of that. Alan would never write out bass lines, but so I was kind of interested early on to be open to all these different experiences, and then trying to bring it into my own music, or the way I just letting all these different experiences sort of guide the way how to be a musician.
Yeah.
Learning from each one of them, and they're all completely different. They all have different discipline, and the complexity moves from sometimes it's in the music and sometimes it's in a different place. You see, like, so I think like having that kind of opportunity to work with so many different types of musicians is what I'm still doing. Just like that, and that's what I enjoy about being a musician. It's like, okay, where is this phenomenon going to take me next? And because it lives, you know, all this music lives with personalities and communities and friendships and conversations. And
So what I assumed or also heard from Gary Husband about Allan Holdsworth's music, that there weren't any bass parts, there weren't even any bass notes at times. So you had to find...
you could choose wherever you want to put the tonic or whatever note you're playing. Or, I mean, he was interested in this kind of, the counterpoint that's happening rhythmically and harmonically is just depends on where people are going, you know, and so that's the center of that music. So you become an arranger, and this happens obviously in any type of music situation. It's a big part of being a musician. It's like counterpoint and arranging.
Instant arranging.
Yeah.
Wow. So how much did songs change after a while? Because you figured out new bass notes.
They would change every night.
Every night, yeah. So a journey of a song might take a couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And he would bring in a song at a sound check, and then people would slowly learn it, and then we would maybe play it a few weeks later.
So he would just play it for you, repeat it repeatedly, and you had to find...
Yeah.
So how good were your ears when you started playing with him?
To figure out this?
Yeah. How do you...
No, that was, I mean, it was like going to school and like figuring out, because the harmonies are not traditional diatonic harmonies.
That's why I'm asking.
Like there are scales that have 9 notes. And yeah, I learned a lot from that.
Wow. So yesterday I talked to your guitar player and I asked him, how do you show your music? How do you teach your music to your band? And he told me that similar approach, that you sometimes give out sheet music, but usually later in the process.
Yeah.
After having played the music for the guys before.
Yeah.
So it informed the way you go about music.
I prefer that way of working.
Yeah.
And with Oscar, we never write out anything.
I was asking about who was I talking? I think to Christian Wust, a Danish saxophone player, and he was in touch with Oscar, I think. And I was like, "Can you give me some sheet music by the duo? Because I love this duo so much." And I'll ask him. And then he was like, "Yeah, Oscar got back to me. There's no sheet music."
Yeah, no, not for that particular project.
Yeah, it's beautiful,
and we want to keep it like that.
Yeah. It's a conscious decision.
Yeah. And also because of the way we work together, it's not a situation where we, like some situations, you have 2 days to make a record, and you have to learn a lot of music quickly. But in the case of me and Oscar, we see each other all the time. We play.
You get together
and just to play.
Yeah.
And so that's a luxury to have that kind of relationship with another musician, where you don't have to learn all the music and then go into the studio.
So
it's more like a part of life, you know. what do you think of this idea? And then, yeah, we can maybe do something with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'd love to see this
more
sometimes, you know, how do you say it, be a fly on a wall, when you guys rehearse and get together the music.
A lot of music is put together like that, you know.
Yeah.
And it's a different experience for the player. You find a different way into the music. And ultimately the result is more, maybe freer.
And personal.
Yeah.
Because you get somebody's very personal reaction to what that guy is hearing, and then there's a decision or a feeling that is closely... And also there's no other sense in between when you have the sense of the visual sense, you know.
And it also might remove some of your habits of, like, when you see a chart, you might instantly like go into, okay, yeah, I know how this works.
Yeah.
But without the chart, it's like, what is it?
Yeah.
How can I approach it? And sometimes you might misunderstand it, and out of that, something good happens.
That's exactly what happened when I just recorded a CD with my trio and this Brazilian guitar player I told you about, Nelson Viras. And he learns like that, mostly like that. He says he's a horrible reader, which isn't completely true, but he learns more. He prefers. So obviously I sent him the sheet music, but also demos. I played it at home for him, tried to play the music as complete as possible. And when we then got into the studio and recorded the songs, I noticed that at some moments he would play stuff that isn't written in the music. That was sometimes an upbeat that I played to another note or a mistake. And it comes every time. Every time we play the head, it's there.
Yeah,
it
became part of the music.
It became part of the music. And you can rely on it. You can rely on it more than somebody reading it, you know. And it makes it more personal. It makes us connect more in a way. So I really like that process. I would love to be able to have more relationships like that, where you see somebody, as you told me about Oscar, you see him very often, and then you can have that kind of relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, I think these kind of activities have been, you know, part of music from the beginning, and that's how music came about. Like this need of people communicating and playing together.
Sure.
And I always liked this when Derek Bailey used to refer to music as playing. He never would use any other term for music. Just playing.
It's the same in German. We say Spiel, which is also game.
Yeah.
And it also it can take on a very childish, childlike connotation. That word spielen.
Yeah.
Playing.
Good. Yeah, that's good.
And it helps sometimes to preserve the inner child. Also.
Yeah.
So maybe you could tell me a little bit about your process when you compose.
Yeah, it's kind of in a way similar. You realize early on that becoming a musician means that you have to spend a lot of time alone with your instrument, which is a part of music that I also really enjoy. Just the solitary, just being alone with your instrument, playing, and the fact that you keep doing that for decades is in itself quite astonishing and fascinating. And beautiful. That all these people are just like get up in the morning and they pick up their instrument and they play.
You're all alone all the time.
All throughout their lives.
Yeah, it's true.
And and I always like, once you realize, okay, if I want to become a musician, I have to enjoy like that aspect of it, being alone with your instrument, and everything comes out of that. Compositions or new ideas about techniques or new harmonies or these kind of things.
Yeah.
So that's how my music sort of, it comes out of that, just playing things and discovering something, and maybe this is something that could turn into a composition.
Do you sometimes...
So it's never really, I don't do much of like composing, you know, like sitting down now, I have to compose.
It's just good.
You know?
About to ask, yeah. So never.
So, I mean,
with,
sometimes
with
I do have
pen and paper. Just
sometimes, but mostly with an instrument.
Sometimes also piano or something else.
Yeah, different. Another thing, because in the beginning I was fascinated by the electric bass, because at the time in the early '80s it was at the height of Jaco and you know.
Did you ever see him live?
No.
No.
But that, you know, had a huge impact on me.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went to America to study, a lot of my teachers, they would encourage me to play acoustic bass, and they said, you know, the electric bass is not really a real instrument, and and why don't you play acoustic bass? If you want to play jazz, you have to play acoustic bass. And that sort of made me feel, I mean, I started appreciating the electric bass even more because of that. And I was like, oh, here's an instrument that has a beautiful tone and lots of possibilities. It's a fairly new instrument. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to spend time with that instrument and sort of say, okay, you can make music on this instrument. Mm-hmm. And also the lack of history, because you didn't, like my friends playing tenor saxophone, they had this like Coltrane and like all this.
Sure.
And with the electric bass, it was more like an open canvas.
Yeah. And
I was fascinated by that. Mm. So I decided not to play acoustic bass at all.
You never did? Not
really. But I did have, like when I was in Iceland studying music, I had to study acoustic bass just to go through the school. Mm-hmm. But
But you play the acoustic bass guitar. But never the upright.
Yeah. But then when I got deeper into playing the electric bass, it's a guitar, and then I started investigating the guitar, like what is that instrument, and what is the history of that instrument, and then you go all the way back to Baroque music, and the history of the lute, and going to Africa and the oud, and then all the other string instruments, sitar, and so I, in a way, started looking at my instrument like I'm playing a guitar in a low register.
Yeah.
And there are lots of other guitars. Mm-hmm. And I started looking into all the different possibilities on the lute and the oud, how people play those instruments, and incorporating that into my playing. Like just, it's all the same instrument.
Mm. You're plucking a string.
Yeah, you're plucking a string. And so a lot of my music comes out of that. It's composed on different string instruments, not necessarily the bass.
Yeah. Did you talk to other electric bass players about that phenomenon?
Yeah, I did. There are quite a few bass players that I know that have a similar approach. Mm-hmm. And like Björn Mayer, the bass player from Sweden, who, they don't necessarily look at the bass as like, okay, here's the electric bass, it's just a guitar.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I have a few specific tunes in mind. From that duo record with Oscar, the first one, there's this one you started out. No? I want to know the history of that song.
That's a good example of something that came out of that, just playing the guitar, and then I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, it's just.
I mean, the idea behind that record was because I was living in New York and Oscar was in Iceland, and he contacted me about making a record, and I thought, why should we make a record? You know, like, do we have any music or? And I just started for myself, just how could we make music that is grounded in something, real, you know. And we, at that point, we didn't know each other that well, and then I started thinking about this, and then I realized I had written music for different occasions, like for a wedding or a funeral, or when somebody, a child is born, or whatever, you know. And I thought, okay, this might be an interesting idea for Oscar. So I called him up and I asked him, did you ever write any music for any specific occasions, family occasions? And he said, yeah, I have. And I said, why don't we collect those songs that we have written in that situation and see what we have. And it turned out to be like the basis of that record.
Yeah. Now the cover makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
What does the title mean?
Afterthought, it means after silence.
Okay. Who did I think I mentioned this in another interview where it came to my mind that somebody says that a solo usually starts with silence and then you feel that silence. That makes me think of that title, After Silence.
Yeah, it was just this idea of like, you know, like we all agree on, the most beautiful part of music is silence. And then there was something in that music, it was quite minimal and it was very personal. And I thought, you know, it grows out of silence, you know.
How did you work on another one of my favorite songs from Ben Monder is on Excavation, it's Allenville. You know, I think it's I think it's in 11 and you play an amazing solo over that. And it's so fluid and so melodic. But you're playing through complicated changes and obviously a complicated meter. So I was wondering how you arrived or got closer to being so fluid over something that's complex like that.
I think maybe that, I mean, we spoke about experiences and how you just try to be a better musician by playing with people. And my early years in New York, I was extremely fortunate because I had met Jim Black and Chris Speed in Boston. And at some point, Chris Speed goes to Bulgaria. He comes back with a cassette with Balkan music, and he plays it for us. And we're like, "Wow, this is the most beautiful music ever!" And it's all in these odd meters, and people play so freely over it. And at no point does it sound like anybody is counting any beats. And they're just playing. And so we basically spent days and days and days learning that music. And again, early on, because none of us was like in a, you know, touring or that, you know, we had so much free time to play music. And we would just get together and play and learn that music, even though it was not, at that point, based on any kind of a, well, it was the beginning of that band called Platshora.
Yeah. That
started out just, you know, loving that music.
What was first, the band or the tape?
It all started with that tape. And then Jim and Brad Shepik and Chris started Platshora, and then they asked me to join.
Right.
So I think that helped me understand the long cycles and rhythmic thinking. And Chris and Jim were extremely generous, like helping me understand that. And Chris had a particularly deep understanding of that.
Yeah. What were some of the lessons that you maybe that really helped you? Next to just playing it.
In that music, well, mostly just playing it and asking Chris, like, how do you do that?
Yeah. So what did he say?
And I was like, well, it's all about like understanding polyrhythms and not counting like all the subdivisions and creating long cycles and different cycles. And it was the best way to learn how to do that, because you can obviously approach that in many different ways. You can just sit down with metronome and try to figure it out. But to do it in that kind of situation with this beautiful music, you know, like, and learning it that way, I think it became more internalized.
Right.
And then sort of using that in a completely different situation, like you mentioned with band. So that helped a lot.
I see.
That, yeah. And then in terms of like complicated harmonies, that came from different, I mean, from Alan Holdsworth maybe, or finding out ways to improvise over complex harmonic.
Did he sometimes talk about that?
Alan?
Yeah?
No, not at all.
You didn't ask him, or?
No, I mean, it was always just about playing. And everything that needed to be said was in the music.
Yeah,
you know?
I see.
Yeah. Or like his thing was, his playing was on such high level. Like, I mean, I just felt like a complete beginner every time I played with him. You know, like, even if you had the best night of your life and you felt like, oh wow, I really felt free. And this evening, and like next to him, it was like just at the
toddler.
Yeah, just at the, like, you know, looking at a mountain and like, okay. And that's a great, and I think we all learn from that just to be truly humble next to somebody like that, and to say like, I'm never going to be able to do that, but at least I can
try.
Yeah,
or try to absorb.
Yeah.
How does it feel to play with Gary Husband?
Oh, amazing. He's one of those complete musicians with a phenomenal understanding of music, both harmonically and rhythmically.
Yeah.
So, it was the same thing, you know, like, he was able to play so musically and freely. And, yeah. I mean, I was so young when I was playing with Alan, and so I was constantly just like in awe.
How was it different when you went into the studio with Alan? Was it different, like next to playing live, or was it like taking the road band into the studio and just playing?
No, it was always just about the playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we did go into the studio, we had played the music quite a bit. I did some tracks with him, just the two of us, which was more like, there's one track on Heart Tattoo Area.
Yeah.
And he had created a track, and he asked me to play bass on that. And that was a different situation. But all the other experiences were just like playing a show. Yeah. It was like playing live music.
On the way here, I was listening to Low Levels, High Stakes. What an amazing, what an amazing track with another great bass solo of yours. Wow.
Thank you.
What is your process these days? I mean, what are you working on, and in terms of practicing or stuff that you're checking out at the moment?
It depends. When I was living in New York, I was touring a lot, and early on, like touring with Alan, and then with Chris Beat and Jim and all these different bands. So I was constantly playing, and now I'm living in Iceland, so I'm not playing quite as much. So I'm doing more composing and recording and practicing and doing different things and teaching. So my process is a little bit different, because back then I was constantly involved in a project and having to learn new music or getting ready for a tour and something like that. And I enjoyed this kind of different activities in music. Like I never really had an idea of like, oh, I'm a jazz bass player and this is what I do. I'm more like, I enjoy music. I love listening to it and I love playing it. And now this is happening in my life, so this is what I'm doing in music. So it's not really understand like like it's more
Yeah.
like I'm just like. And then I started this performance space in Iceland, and so I'm really enjoying that kind of work. Like not playing, but just listening to other people play.
Yeah, you're enabling music without playing it, but
Yeah,
still,
yeah.
when you're playing, you're enabling music as well. But
it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Composing is one way of doing it, or playing is one way
Right.
of doing it, and then teaching is another one, and then
it goes back to
organizing gigs is another way. I mean, there's so many beautiful ways of being inside of music.
Right.
I mean, it's like a whole life system.
It was Olaf.
Oh.
I think it goes back to what you said before, that you're just a lover of music. Right? You love listening to music.
Yeah.
So that's another way
Yeah.
to make that happen.
Yeah.
I want to get back to Seria because I'm wondering what the process is when you record something like that. How many tracks does it start with? Or is it everything that's on the record was in the studio together, or do you sometimes go...
yeah, there are quite a bit... both those records involve quite a bit of overdubbing and things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So
most of the tracks.
What I'm wondering about is your process of listening to something and then going, it's not complete yet. I need this, or I need this, you know?
Yeah. A very important person in that and in my musical life is Anthony Burr, the Australian clarinet player. And he has, and we've made music together for many, many years, and we've made duo records, and he was a big part of that process. He helped creating that music with me. So, and the layers on those recordings, it's quite dense. I mean, there are a lot, like Hildur is playing multiple cellos, and Eivind Kang is playing multiple violas, and Anthony Burr is playing multiple clarinets, and so I was interested in making this kind of music that didn't really have any kind of a, because I'm not a singer, and I just wanted to have multiple layers of counterpoint, and none of them was really like taking the lead. And the listener can sort of choose who is telling the story. Like is it the alto or the tenor or the soprano, whatever. So that's one idea behind that music. So I'm playing lots of different guitars and basses on one track, and so there's more overdubs on those recordings than other things that I've done.
I'm always noticing new things when I listen to it. And also, once I start a song of your music, Seria or the duo, I'm never in my mind, I'm never in a tiny space. I'm always in a big landscape. The moment you start playing, I'm somewhere on a big field or whatever. Does it happen to you too? Or is this something that is in your mind? You have a visual thing going on sometimes when you play?
Not necessarily. But yeah. But there is something about, I mean, in Iceland you can see quite far, like wherever you are, you can see the mountains from a distance.
Yeah.
Like living in New York, you could just see the next building. And maybe that's the difference between that kind of,
That was my assumption. But that really shows me the power of your music, that it immediately transports me somewhere else. And that's very rare. I mean, it's quite an accomplishment, I think.
Well, it's something, I mean, music does so many things, you know, it brings you into different spaces, and so I don't necessarily think visually when I make music, or I don't think of like landscape or anything like that. It's just, music is just in itself a whole universe, you know?
Right.
Disconnected from anything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much in that, just the phenomenon of music.
When I see you play, or yesterday when I saw you play, there's a sense of relaxation in your whole body. So also a breathing element. I can see it in the way you hold your instrument, the way you kind of move. Was it always like that? Starting from a relaxed body feeling or a relaxed state of playing, or did you have to work towards that?
I've never really thought of it, but I think, I would say working towards that, or letting the music take you to that place, and then thanking the music for having done that. So, like, music does that. If you allow it to lead the way, it takes you to a place, and then like, oh, maybe this is happening now, and but it comes through the music, like the music is guiding all of this.
The music is guiding your way of moving, you mean?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like it's not a conscious decision of like I want to make music that, but it just happens, I think.
It happens connects me to what Steve Swallow said when I talked to him. He said, music happens to you.
Yeah, exactly.
The changes happen to you.
Yeah,
a song happens to you.
Yeah, I really relate to that.
Yeah.
Allowing the music to do that. Just saying like, okay.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna follow you. Just lead the way.
Yeah.